Welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I am joined today by Patrick Burns. He is with Patrick Burns Company, which I think is maybe the best branding I've ever seen. So, Patrick.
It'd be the laziest branding you've ever heard.
It's good, though, you know, like if you want some people to remember. And I like the logo. It's very creative. I like how you put it together. I appreciate that. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about what Patrick Burns does at Patrick Burns Company.
So we primarily work with B2B companies, help them generate awareness and leads. Our primary channels of growth are LinkedIn and email. For B2B, that's the best channels to get real tangible ROI from my experience. I'm really active on the LinkedIn platform. I mean, I've built up almost 90,000 followers, 100 million plus content views, and I've generated millions in pipeline through that platform. So we basically help B2B companies use our practices that we've done internally to grow our company with our marketing and sales efforts.
Okay. All right. And so I'm imagining that you ended up in this space because you did something in the past and realized this worked for you. So talk to me a little bit about your background. Like, how did you end up doing this today?
So I graduated in 2014. I basically jumped straight into entrepreneurship right out of college. I almost didn't finish college because I wanted to get into entrepreneurship, that early. But I did it for my mom. I got the degree. I got my degree with that. But I first worked with a tech startup. Basically, it was like Uber for lawn care and snow removal. That was like the big Uber craze. Everybody was making applications that were Uber-like.
Yeah.
I worked with that company for 4 or 5 months. I was working 80 to 100-hour weeks, and I didn't have any equity in it. So I'm like, I probably should just do my own thing if I'm going to work that hard, So I pivoted. I started a company. Basically, it was a third-party software where you would connect online personal trainers with clientele and facilitate that relationship because it was a similar platform model with the company that I worked with in the previous role. I did that for about a year. It was a failure in some aspects, but what I learned through that process was that I was naturally talented at marketing and branding.
Okay.
So I basically put up my hat on the unicorn shot of this new tech startup, trying to get $1 billion valuation with that. I'm like, okay, let's just build an agency. Let's get actual cash flow coming in. And then maybe we could revisit, one of those tech products down the road.
Yeah.
And since then, I've been doing this for about 8 years. Okay. With the agency.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, interestingly, it sounds like some of the stuff that you were doing before was more B2C potentially. And you were, so now you're in that kind of, you've learned the language of LinkedIn, and everyone in the B2B space is trying to figure that out. So how did you?
Yeah, it was an untapped platform really when I first joined it, because there was so many agencies that were popping up, digital agencies. And I saw them be so aggressive on Facebook and Instagram and those other social platforms. And I was like, man, not many people are paying attention to LinkedIn. And you actually connect with like senior executives and high-level decision makers so much easier. So I'm like, I'm just going to focus on that platform. And, it's been super fruitful.
So I can imagine, as someone who knows LinkedIn very well, that, you're on the platform daily and you see some people doing some really good things and some people doing some really dumb things. So what are some what are some examples of both? What are some things you think people do really well, and what are some examples of things you're like, stop, just stop, don't do that anymore?
Well, I think people have overall, it's definitely improved on the quality of content that's being created. I see a lot of great content creators that are coming to that platform and producing awesome videos, sound bites, and written content and copy. Which it makes it more competitive for me. It's like, well, I need to level up my skill set because they're coming in and doing such a great, which is great. So yeah, a lot of the copy and the video content has really went up in quality. Something that I've seen, and it's, we really help companies with lead generation, strategizing outbound campaigns to generate leads. And a lot of people don't know how to do that effectively. They'll basically send you a message.
You mean the 2 or 3 I get a day that says I'd be a great franchise owner?
Yeah, that's like not even relevant to you and way off place.
Yeah.
But, well, I mean, there's a lot of things wrong with, a lot of these providers. First of all, it's super generalized messaging. It's so generic. It's not impactful. It's not personalized for their specific role and their industry. And then a lot of times they'll make it more about them than the actual prospect. It's like you're trying to, deliver value to them, not brag about yourself.
Right.
So when I'm messaging somebody, I want them to see the before and after journey of working with my company and my solution so they can experience that, and they'll be way more inclined to reply back because, truth be told, we all have our own self-interest. You have to, lean into their own self-interest to get them interested, with your messaging. So that's something that's key.
Yeah, and that is an interesting thing that we see in the B2B space that's missing is there's this, B2B is very different because it's about the business, yada, yada, yada. No, there's still this, what's in it for the person you're talking to, working with? What do they want?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are they trying to accomplish? And so doing that work that you're doing sounds hard. And when I mean hard, it doesn't sound like something you could automate very well. Are you able to use a lot of automation around it, or does it take a lot of research? And how does that?
It takes a lot. Yeah, it takes a lot of strategy, and there's certain things that you could potentially automate, but you really need to be more. It's all about the strategy and refining the targeting, because more and more people are also doing outbound activities now, and they're sending a bunch of DMs and emails and phone calls. And if you don't really dial in that segmentation and that personalization aspect with it, you're going to waste a lot of money and time.
Okay.
So
is that what you mean when you talk about marketing strategy, or are there more components to that part of it for you?
Well, I'm just talking about in general with the marketing strategy. It's like we need to be dialed in on this specific industry, this specific title. We have to understand their specific pain points and just be very refined with that so we can speak exactly to their current situation.
Yeah.
And it's way more about quality than quantity.
Yeah.
I mean, before LinkedIn allowed you to send more messages and be more active. Now they're more and more restrictive. So you have to be more personalized and more clever, because everything that you send, you have less quantity going out. So you need to be much more refined in your approach with that.
And so talk to me about how or when do companies think about engaging you? So what is it how do you prospect them? What are you looking for when you have someone who's going to be an ideal client to work with in your category?
Typically we usually work with SMBs. We have worked with some mid-market and enterprise, but typically it's SMBs. But when I work with them, I really want to be an accelerant of a proven sales process, because that's the biggest, if they're too early stage, even if I generate a pipeline, they don't know effectively even how to manage that or have the operations dialed in to generate a lot of ROI from the pipeline that I produce then.
Yeah.
So just in the best interest of their budget and their spend, they really need to dial those things in internally, and then they can bring on companies like us to accelerate. It's like, okay, we know our customer persona, we have a proven sales process. Now we just need a lot more pipeline generated because we know we're going to get ROI with that. So they typically need to be more established. I would say at least a couple million in annual revenue is kind of our sweet spot with it, upwards of 50 to 100 million.
And so are you looking for, is it kind of service providers like accountants and lawyers and things like that, or is it different kinds of?
We primarily work with technology companies.
Okay.
Because, I worked with a couple tech startups, in my previous roles with that. I've always just had a natural inclination to technology companies. So I would say that's probably 80% of our portfolio, whether it be software products, IT services, software development agencies, and then the rest of it is professional services that are B2B. So agencies that, they could do cash flow management or human resources or staffing or something like that. Those would be the other services.
Okay, nice. So you talked a minute ago about content, and we're a B2B marketing firm, so we build a bunch of content, and you talked about good content and bad content, and now we've got AI and all those other kind of things. How have you seen content change recently? Well,
I think it's becoming a lot more humanized and personalized than it used to be in the past, especially in B2B. And I would push any company to allow their employees to be their ambassador and to basically build up their personal brand with that. Because, in the past, it would just be a logo, and that was the company and that was the brand. But now with social everybody can build their own presence. And companies are kind of worried about that. Like, oh, well, we'll help them build it. What if they leave? It's like, they're still going to be your advocate and they're going to be involved with you. And it's still going to have more of a net positive outcome by allowing them to do that. So I think things are much more personalized with social. Just socials made that. People want to work with people. I mean, the logos look cool, but at the end of the day, it's going to be judged based on your personality and the value that you bring, if somebody's going to work with you. So I think it's become much more humanized and personalized and more authentic. It's not, the content doesn't have to be obviously you want a certain polish to some content, but not all pieces of content have to be so commercial level type content because they want something that feels real to them. Yeah. So I think that's been a big shift.
And you touch on something that's interesting because we work with companies and we'll work on their corporate brand, and we know, and just exactly what you said, it doesn't matter what we share out from the corporate brand. If the individuals don't pick it up and if they don't start to build their own brand, it won't be as effective. And interestingly, in some of the problems we run into, it's not that the employees, like they're not worried about the employees going off and creating their own brand and leaving them. It's more about getting the employees engaged or to be ambassadors. What have you found anything effective to get more of those individuals on board?
Yeah, I think they just need to understand the value for their career of building a personal brand and having that thought leadership. I mean, it's obviously with your current role, it's going to have a lot of value, but it can open the door to a multitude of opportunities outside of that too. It'll just attract more opportunities and you'll have more credibility. If you're trying to get a different role or, you're trying to do something on the side, you never know. I mean, there's a lot of people that are now doing side hustles or, part-time things. And by using that to build up your brand, you can have a launch pad.
I shouldn't just be on LinkedIn when I am ready to either change my job or I lost my job.
No, you should be on there all the time providing value. I'm just saying it can help.
I'm joking with people who come on to LinkedIn and they haven't been on in 2 years and now all of a sudden they're trying to show up, and it's supposed to be something you kind of nurture along the way.
Yeah, it's a long-term strategy. Anything with building up a brand and its presence, you definitely need to be long-term focused with that. Yeah. And I evolved over the years because initially that's all I cared about was just growing my presence, but then I wouldn't really focus on my pipeline. Yeah. So I was like, well, I'm barely getting any sales, but I'm making a lot of posts. And then I pivoted to be too short term. I'm like, okay, let's just focus on pipeline. Let's not care about posting. And now I've come full circle where it's balanced. Like, okay, building credibility, value, and then you're also in the short term generating that cash flow and pipeline.
Okay, so I love that. So we're going to go to a break and I want to come back and I want you to unpack the difference between presence and pipeline. So what do you mean when you talk about either one side or the other? Because that's a really important conversation. So you're listening to The Claw. I'm talking to Patrick Burns with Patrick Burns Company. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist, and we'll be back in just a minute.
The Claw podcast is brought to you by Liger. Liger is a hybrid marketing firm combining a brand strategy consultancy and a production house that offers the full range of content and creative services. We can be your entire marketing department or your entire marketing department's favorite people to work with. We save the world from boring, broken marketing by putting businesses in brand therapy so they can express their most authentic, memorable selves. And then we share their story so they can be known. For more information, visit ligerpartners.com and follow us on our social media platforms.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm joined today by Patrick Burns with Patrick Burns Company, and he knows all things about that little bitty platform LinkedIn that if you're in the B2B space, which is where we spend a lot of time, you need to know a lot about. And so as we were going into the break, Patrick, you were talking about, at times you concentrate too much on presence and at times you concentrate too much on pipeline. So I want you to unpack those. So what do you mean the difference between presence and pipeline, and how do I know I might be doing too much of one or the other?
So basically, when I look at presence, it's really your activity through LinkedIn's feed. Like, what content are you consistently publishing? Okay. And then also, what opt-ins do you have? So if you have a newsletter or get subscribers to a channel and constantly distributing content and not having a hard ask on those pieces of content, just be altruistic. I'm going to give as much value as humanly possible and just let karma take care of the rest. I mean, that's really how you have to approach when you're just building presence and giving value with that. But then when you're wanting to generate the pipeline, it really comes down to those one-on-one conversations with people that really need your solution with that.
Yeah.
So really engaging directly, like I was saying, with the hyper-personalized, research and due diligence and contacting them and, really diving into their current pain points and addressing those, because the way a sales situation happen is somebody has to take action because they feel X amount of pain. Right. So we have to find that pain, amplify that pain to get them to take that action, which we're trying to have a better positive outcome for them. I mean, we're nudging them in that direction. So just be altruistic, give as much value, and then have more one-on-one conversations to actually generate sales and pipeline.
So it sounds like then on the present side, I might be posting more generally to my feed and things like that, versus on the pipeline side, I might be doing more direct messages or interactions, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. And if somebody doesn't respond to a more sales-driven type conversation with a direct message, you can always flip it and be brand building. Maybe it's not the right time, but you can subscribe to my newsletter or something like that. Now I can nurture you for, a longer period of time and then potentially work with them down the road.
Yeah. Challenge with it always is to try to just stay in front of them. Stay in front of them as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Attention's fragmented, so it's not easy.
Yeah. And so you've talked a little bit about, knowing those pain points. So you're working with lots of different companies and doing things with them. What is it that you do to uncover the pain points? Do your clients come to you and they know them, or do you have to go do some research and determine that pain point?
Typically they do. It's just we have to articulate them in a way that, I guess they kind of do, but maybe they haven't really crystallized what those pain points are. Yeah. And you also have to attach it to business outcomes. That's the biggest thing too. If I really want to get somebody to take action, I have to attach it to a business outcome. It's you can have this little problem. Let's say, for instance, getting leads is a problem. Okay, that's a pain point. Well, at the surface, that's all it is. But let's think about all the implications that can happen by not generating enough leads.
Right.
It can hurt morale in the company because you're not growing. I mean, you're kind of declining. Inconsistent growth. You don't feel like you have a predictable way to grow your company. You might not be eligible for finance. You give your financials to a bank or something. It's you're not growing. You see all those different implications on that one pain. If they understand that, they're way more to take an action because it's not that surface level. It can have so many implications of one pain point, if that makes sense.
It does. It sounds like it's the ultimate hypochondriac thing. So I cut my finger and all these terrible things are going to happen. I'm going to die, right? The worst case scenario.
Yeah. Your business could die. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not generating consistent revenue, predictable revenue, business can be in trouble.
So in Ligerland, our big focus, we work with a lot of companies that want to be known. So that's the idea. It's how do we help you be known? And we work with a lot of what we would consider, second and third tier companies that are competing against larger companies that are not known as well. You spend a lot of time watching people on LinkedIn. You talked about people doing it well, people not, whatever. Give me a concrete example of either a person or a thing you've seen somebody do on LinkedIn and you're that's super smart. That's a really smart way for them to get themselves out there and to people recognize them.
I mean, the biggest thing to me is people need to put their egos aside and be kind of more shameless with it and just put themselves out there and refine their content and what they're producing. That's the biggest thing to me, because I think people get way too caught up on, it needs to be perfect or it has to be exactly right. And then they never take action or do it.
Yeah.
And it's through repetition, you're going to gather market feedback of what actually resonates with your audience. And then you're going to work that skill set of delivering more valuable content and more engaging content. So people just have to be more comfortable. Anything you start fresh, you're not going to be great at. I mean, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
Embrace that, those learning situations, those growing pains.
I think it's worded embrace the suck, right? Like it's gonna suck at first.
Yeah, you're gonna suck for a while. Trust me, if you pulled out old posts to me, I'm sure it'd be a nightmare.
Yeah. Just don't look back. Don't look back. Don't look back. So future, so what are some things you see? It's interesting because several years ago, we were recommending against LinkedIn for some clients because it looked like it was in this weird place. And then it had this golden resurgence, right? So as marketers, we're always kind of thinking about, well, what's next and what's new? What are you either excited about, worried about? How do you think, does artificial intelligence play into this at all for some of the stuff?
Yeah, generative AI is definitely a big topic of discussion for marketing because I think it's a great tool as long as it's not used and abused and you don't over rely on that tool.
Yeah.
I mean, ChatGPT is great I love it for ideation,
right,
creating ideas for content because it can just go through a bunch of, write me, come up with 50 topics on this subject matter in this format, and it'll do that. And then now I have a bunch of ideas. Oh, well, now I have a list that I can go through and make them personalized. So you can't be over reliant on artificial intelligence, but you definitely can use it in the creative process. But I still would never have ChatGPT write me a complete script or a complete email sequence and just it's going to work. Because it could be off, not authentic and a little bit off, but it gives you great frameworks and it helps come up with a lot of ideas because, as marketers, it's difficult to come up with fresh ideas all the time, constantly with that. So it helps build out that repository of ideas.
I'm a insomniac, so I'm often up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I talk about
aren't all entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I talk about how ChatGPT is like the research assistant that's always there. They'll always talk to me. I can get some ideas and get things going, but certainly it's more about let it create a research for you, but you have to curate. You have to know that it's right. And in marketing, it could be one word is off, and then someone's just going to completely ignore the message because it just whatever. So So next for you. So what's next for your company? What's your goals and what are you looking at?
Well, with us in Q4 of I would say Q3, Q4, we went through a rebrand. And then I went through rebranding the website, all of our materials, our packaging of services. And then I went through this experimentation phase because we were at a plateau of growth. And I'm like, okay, let's just try a bunch of different marketing stuff that we've never tried and see what happens. I burned a bunch of budget. I burned a bunch of budget, learning those lessons with that. And I'm like, okay, I learned 50% of this works. I can keep doing it. But also let's go back to the core of what's gotten us to this point with that. So right now, it's just let's stay laser focused with our core offering, our core process, and layer those additional channels or strategies on top, but not be reliant on them. And then let's get to a certain level of growth where we can do acquisitions, because I really want to get mergers and acquisitions. This. I mean, I've been doing this for 8+ years of this particular service, and I really want to add complementary services that are easy to get off the ground because they're already established companies. So I really want to sink my teeth in mergers and acquisition. And I have partners that are really experienced and built and sold multiple companies. But I have to wait until I get a certain line of revenue. I have to take. And it's okay, now it's time to play that. So that's the big goal of this year is to get, buy a company.
Nice. I like it. That's a classic entrepreneurial path. I like it. So, well, how do people get in touch with you? If I want to reach out and find you, I bet you might be on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'm probably on LinkedIn. I'm the guy in the blue blazer on LinkedIn with the spiked hair, Patrick Burns. Yeah. Or you could email me at hello@patrickburns.co.
Very nice. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This is such a key component of the overall kind of B2B ecosystem that we look at when we're talking to customers. And it's such a mystery. People really don't, they think of LinkedIn as a Rolodex or something. They don't understand that there's some great power in there. And you're so close to people you'd never get to connect to. So it's
for sure. That's how we connected. And here we are.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, you've been listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzcott, Chief Strategist at Liger. We'll put all the information in our notes so that you can get in touch with Patrick on LinkedIn, probably. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time.